Life in our small town was supposed to be idyllic. Nestled in a quiet valley surrounded by rolling hills and lush forests, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. My name is John, and I had been married to Emma for 10 years. We had 2 beautiful children, Amy, aged 8, and Ben, aged 6. Our home was a modest, cozy house on Elm Street, with a big backyard where the kids played, and a front porch where Emma and I often sat in the evenings, sipping tea and talking about our day. Our life seemed perfect from the outside. I worked as a manager at the local hardware store, while Emma ran a successful home-based bakery. She was known in town for her delicious cakes and pastries, which she sold at the local market every weekend. Our kids were happy and well-behaved, excelling in school and loved by their teachers and friends. Emma was the love of my life. She was beautiful, with long chestnut hair and sparkling green eyes. She had a laugh that could light up a room, and a kindness that endeared her to everyone she met. I was content, believing that we had built a strong, loving family together. However, beneath the surface, things were not as perfect as they seemed. In recent months, Emma's behavior had changed subtly, but noticeably. She had become more distant, often lost in her thoughts, and seemed to be preoccupied with something she wouldn't share. I chalked it up to the stress of running her business and taking care of the kids, but deep down, a nagging feeling told me something was off. It started with small things. Emma had always been attentive, always making sure our home was warm and welcoming, but lately, she seemed distracted. She spent more time on her phone, her laughter and smiles often directed at the screen rather than at me or the kids. She started to dress differently, more provocatively, especially when she said she was going out to run errands or deliver cakes. Her excuses for being away from home became more frequent and vague. One evening, I noticed she was texting someone during dinner. Normally, Emma would never use her phone at the table. I glanced over and saw a message from a contact saved as Karen, her supposed friend from high school. The message was short and cryptic. "Can't wait to see you tonight." It struck me as odd because Emma had never mentioned meeting Karen recently. I tried to push it out of my mind, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As days turned into weeks, my suspicions grew. Emma started coming home later than usual, often with flimsy excuses about last-minute cake orders or meeting with clients. One night, she came home smelling of a cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying she had bumped into someone at the market. Her explanations always felt rehearsed, lacking the sincerity I had come to expect from her. I decided to pay closer attention. I started noting down the times she left and returned, the names she mentioned, and the stories she told. Patterns began to emerge, inconsistencies that painted a troubling picture. She would say she was going to one place but ended up somewhere entirely different. She became defensive when I asked about her day, her answers curt and evasive. The final straw came one Friday evening. Emma had told me she was going to a bakery supply store in the next town, a trip that should have taken no more than 2 hours. She was gone for nearly 5. When she finally returned, she was flustered and avoided eye contact. I tried to keep calm, but my frustration boiled over. "Emma, where have you been? You said you'd be back hours ago," I confronted her as she walked through the door. "I told you, John. The store was crowded, and I had to wait." "Then I got stuck in traffic," she replied, not meeting my gaze. "Traffic? On a Friday evening in our small town? Do you think I'm stupid?" I snapped, unable to contain my anger. Her face hardened. "You're overreacting. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Because something doesn't add up, Emma. You're hiding something from me. I can feel it," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. She sighed and walked past me, heading straight to the bedroom. "I'm tired, John. I don't want to argue." As she disappeared upstairs, I stood there, grappling with a storm of emotions. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was slipping away from me, and I didn't know why. But I was determined to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. My suspicions consumed me. I needed solid proof, something undeniable that would force Emma to confront the truth. I began to monitor her more closely, paying attention to every detail, every inconsistency. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon the evidence that would shatter my world. One Saturday morning, Emma left early, saying she had a large cake order to deliver to a new client. As she drove away, I decided to follow her. I stayed a few cars behind, making sure she wouldn't notice me. She didn't go to any bakery or client's house. Instead, she drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she entered the hotel, greeting someone with a hug that was far too intimate for a business meeting. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands shaking as I struggled to keep my composure. I waited for a while, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. When I couldn't take it anymore, I followed her inside, masking my fury with a forced calmness. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I strode towards the elevators. I didn't know the room number, but I didn't need to. I listened carefully as I walked down the hallway, searching for any sounds that would lead me to Emma. Then I heard it. Laughter. Her laughter, mixed with a man's voice. My blood boiled. I took a deep breath, trying to steel myself for what was to come. I approached the door and knocked, a part of me hoping I was wrong, that this was all a misunderstanding. But when the door opened and I saw them together, all doubts vanished. Emma's eyes widened in shock as she saw me. She was wrapped in a towel, her hair wet from a recent shower. The man, a tall, muscular figure, stood behind her, his shirt unbuttoned. "John, what are you doing here?" Emma stammered, her face turning pale. "Who the hell is this?" the man demanded, stepping forward as if to protect Emma from me. "I'm her husband," I said through gritted teeth. "And you're the bastard who's been fucking my wife." The man's bravado faltered for a moment, but then he sneered. "Look, buddy, I think you should leave." Rage exploded inside me. I shoved Emma aside and lunged at him, my fists flying. He tried to defend himself, but my fury gave me strength. I landed punch after punch, my knuckles splitting as they connected with his face. Blood splattered, and his nose crunched under the force of my blows. "Stop! John, stop!" Emma screamed, trying to pull me off him, but I was beyond reasoning. I finally stopped when the man slumped to the floor, barely conscious, his face a mess of blood and bruises. I turned to Emma, my chest heaving with exertion and rage. "How long, Emma? How long have you been cheating on me?" I demanded, my voice raw with hurt. Tears streamed down her face. "John, please, I can explain." "Explain? There's nothing to explain. You've been lying to me, betraying me, our family," I shouted, my anger mixed with the overwhelming pain of her betrayal. She sobbed, collapsing to the floor. "I'm sorry, John. I never meant for it to go this far. It was just... I felt so lonely, and he was there for me." I shook my head, disgusted by her excuses. "Lonely? I was there for you, Emma. I loved you. And you threw it all away for this piece of shit?" I glanced at the man, who groaned and tried to sit up. I kicked him in the ribs, sending him back to the floor. "You stay down, you coward." Emma reached out to me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. We're done. You can pack your things and get out of the house. I don't want to see you ever again." I turned and walked out of the room, my heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. As I drove home, the realization hit me. My marriage was over. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But I wouldn't let her destroy me. I had to stay strong for Amy and Ben. I would get through this, no matter how much it hurt. Returning home, the weight of the morning's events bore down on me. Every corner of our house was filled with memories of Emma and our life together, now tainted by her betrayal. I knew I had to confront her properly, to lay everything out in the open and decide the next steps for our shattered family. Later that evening, Emma arrived, her eyes red from crying, her face a mask of regret. The kids were already in bed, their innocent dreams untouched by the turmoil brewing between their parents. Emma hesitated at the doorway, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat and devoid of the love it once held. She nodded silently and followed me into the living room. We sat across from each other, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. "Why, Emma?" I asked, breaking the silence. "Why did you do it?" She looked down at her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know, John. I felt so alone, so disconnected. You were always busy with work, and I needed someone." "Someone?" I spat the word, my anger flaring up again. "You needed someone. So you chose to betray me and our family? Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt the kids?" Emma flinched at my words. "I know, John. I know I messed up, but I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted it to go this far." "You didn't want to hurt me?" I echoed, incredulous. "Emma, you've shattered my trust, our life together, and for what? For some cheap thrill? She started sobbing, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't like that. I was lost, and he made me feel wanted. I know it's no excuse, but I was so unhappy. I shook my head, unable to understand her reasoning. We could have worked through it, Emma. We could have talked, gone to counseling, anything but this. Her sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry. I stood up, the sight of her breaking down doing nothing to soften my resolve. Sorry isn't enough, Emma. You need to leave. I can't have you here, not after what you've done. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. Please, John, don't do this. Don't break up our family. We can fix this. I can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? How do you fix betrayal, Emma? How do you rebuild trust that's been completely destroyed? She got up and moved towards me, her hands reaching out to touch me. We can try. Please, John, for the kid's sake, let's try. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. No, Emma. It's too late for that. You made your choice and now you have to live with the consequences. Her face crumpled and she fell to her knees, pleading. Please, John. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. Pack your things and go. You can stay with a friend or find a hotel. I don't care, but you're not staying here. She cried harder, but I steeled myself against her tears. My decision was made. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me, and there was no going back from that. As she gathered her things and left the house, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, but the road ahead was still long and filled with pain. I knew I had to stay strong, for myself and for my children. This was just the beginning of my journey towards healing and moving forward. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Emma moved out, staying with a friend while I tried to pick up the pieces of our shattered life. I focused on Amy and Ben, doing my best to shield them from the chaos, but my mind was consumed by thoughts of revenge, the anger boiling just beneath the surface. I couldn't let Emma's betrayal go unanswered. I needed to make sure she felt the pain she had inflicted on me. The idea of vengeance gave me a twisted sense of purpose, a way to channel my rage into something tangible. I started planning meticulously, ensuring that every detail was perfect. The first step was gathering more information. I hired a private investigator to dig into Emma's lover, the man who had destroyed my family. It didn't take long to get a full dossier on him. His name was Chris, he was single, and he worked at a local gym. The investigator provided me with everything I needed: addresses, schedules, and even some unsavory details about his personal life. With this information in hand, I set my plan into motion. I knew Emma would be at her friend's place on Friday evening, which gave me the perfect window of opportunity. I made sure Amy and Ben were safely with my parents for the weekend, ensuring they were far away from what I was about to do. Friday night arrived, and I drove to Chris's apartment, parking a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention. I wore a dark hoodie and gloves, making sure to stay in the shadows. The adrenaline surged through me as I approached his building, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. I reached his door, and using a set of lockpicking tools I had borrowed from a friend, I quietly broke in. The apartment was dark and empty, just as I had hoped. I moved swiftly, searching for anything that could be used against him. It didn't take long to find a stash of drugs hidden in a drawer, along with some incriminating documents about his side business of selling illegal substances. With everything I needed, I carefully planted the drugs and documents in places where they would be easily discovered. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the local police, disguising my voice as I reported a disturbance and suspicious activity at Chris's address. I slipped out of the apartment just as silently as I had entered, feeling a grim satisfaction as I imagined the chaos that would unfold when the police arrived. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. I had one more step to take, something that would hit Emma directly. The next day, I arranged for a meeting with Emma at a local cafe, presenting it as a chance to discuss the kids and our separation. She arrived looking haggard and remorseful. I had to fight the urge to feel pity for her. I needed to stay focused. As we sat down, I pulled out my phone and played a recording of the call I had made to the police. Her face paled as she realized what it meant. "John, what have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I made sure your lover faces the consequences of his actions, I replied coldly. Just like you will face the consequences of yours. She stared at me, tears welling up in her eyes. You can't do this, John. This isn't right. Right? You want to talk about what's right, Emma? You destroyed our family. This is just the beginning of your reckoning. I left her there, sobbing into her hands, as I walked out of the cafe. The satisfaction of my revenge was fleeting, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I had struck back, but the pain of her betrayal still lingered, a constant reminder of what I had lost. In the following days, news spread about Chris's arrest. He was charged with possession and distribution of illegal substances, his reputation and life in ruins. Emma, too, faced the fallout, her involvement with him casting a shadow over her once respected bakery business. Customers dwindled, and whispers of her infidelity spread through the town. But the revenge that had seemed so sweet now felt bitter. I had hurt her, just as she had hurt me, but it didn't bring the closure I had hoped for. The pain remained, a gnawing ache that no amount of retribution could soothe. I realized that true healing would require more than revenge. It would require moving forward and rebuilding my life from the ashes of our broken marriage. As the days turned into weeks, the fallout from my revenge settled like dust. Emma's business continued to suffer, and the whispers of her infidelity became louder in our small town. Chris remained in jail, his life and reputation destroyed. Despite my attempts at vengeance, I felt no real satisfaction, only a deepening sense of emptiness. I knew I needed to have one final conversation with Emma to truly close this chapter of our lives. I needed to hear her side of the story, not to forgive her, but to understand and find some semblance of peace. I called her and asked if she could meet me at the park where we had taken the kids so many times before. She agreed, her voice shaky and unsure. When I arrived at the park, Emma was already there, sitting on a bench near the playground. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sadness. I sat down beside her, the silence between us heavy and charged with unresolved emotions. "John," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen." I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Why, Emma? Why did you do it?" She sighed, her eyes fixed on the ground. "I was lonely, John. You were always working, always busy. I felt like I was invisible, like you didn't see me anymore. Chris, he made me feel wanted, alive." "That's a poor excuse for what you did," I replied, my voice cold. "You could have talked to me, told me how you felt. Instead, you chose to betray me, betray our family." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I know. I was selfish and stupid. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't go as far as it did. But I was wrong." I looked at her, searching for any sign of the woman I had loved for so long. "Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt the kids?" She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I know, John, and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to destroy our family. I was just so lost." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "You need to understand that actions have consequences, Emma. You made choices that led us here, and now we have to deal with the fallout." She wiped her tears away and looked at me with pleading eyes. "What do we do now, John? How do we move forward?" "We divorce," I said firmly. "It's the only way. We need to make sure the kids are taken care of, but as for us, there's no going back." She nodded, her expression resigned. "I understand. But please, John, don't take the kids away from me. They need their mother." I looked at her, the pain in her eyes mirroring my own. "We'll share custody. They deserve both of us, despite everything. But you need to get your life together, Emma. Prove that you can be the mother they need." "I will," she promised, her voice filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." We sat there in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the park, casting long shadows on the playground where our children had once played so happily. The conversation had been painful, but necessary. It was time to let go of the anger and focus on what mattered most: our kids and their future. As I stood up to leave, Emma reached out and touched my arm. John, I'm sorry for everything. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. With one last look at the woman I had once loved, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the remnants of our shattered life. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a path I had to walk, for myself and for my children. It was time to rebuild, to find peace, and to create a new beginning. The decision to divorce Emma was inevitable, but the process was far from simple. As we prepared for the legal battle, my focus remained on ensuring that Amy and Ben would be taken care of. I hired a highly recommended attorney, Sandra, to represent me. She was known for her no-nonsense approach and her ability to secure favorable outcomes for her clients. The first hearing was scheduled for early autumn. The crisp air and the changing leaves seemed almost symbolic of the transition my life was undergoing. I arrived at the courthouse with Sandra by my side, my heart heavy with a mix of anticipation and dread. Emma was already there, sitting with her own lawyer. She looked anxious and exhausted, a shadow of the woman I had once known. The proceedings began with the usual formalities, the judge outlining the rules and expectations. Sandra presented our case with precision, highlighting Emma's infidelity and the impact it had on our family. She argued for joint custody, emphasizing my active role in the children's lives and my ability to provide a stable home environment. Emma's lawyer, however, tried to paint a different picture. He attempted to downplay her infidelity, focusing instead on her role as a mother and the bond she shared with Amy and Ben. He argued that the children would be better off with their mother, portraying me as overly aggressive and vengeful. The judge listened carefully, asking questions and seeking clarification on several points. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, each side presenting their arguments with fervor. I kept my gaze fixed on the judge, avoiding looking at Emma. I couldn't afford to let my emotions get the better of me. After several hours of testimonies, character witnesses, and cross-examinations, the judge called for a recess. We stepped out into the hallway, the weight of the trial pressing down on us. Sandra pulled me aside, her expression serious. John, we're doing well, but we need to stay focused. The judge seems fair, but we can't let our guard down, she advised, her tone firm. I nodded, appreciating her guidance. I just want what's best for the kids, I replied, my voice filled with resolve. When the trial resumed, the judge addressed us with a calm but authoritative voice. I've reviewed the evidence and listened to both sides. It's clear that both parents care deeply for their children. However, the circumstances of this case require careful consideration. He paused, looking directly at Emma. Mrs. Anderson, your actions have had a significant impact on your family. While I acknowledge your role as a mother, it's important to recognize the consequences of your decisions. Turning to me, the judge continued. Mr. Anderson, your commitment to your children is evident. You have demonstrated stability and a willingness to provide for their needs. After a moment of silence, the judge delivered his verdict. Given the evidence and the best interests of the children, I am granting joint custody to both parents. The children will split their time equally between both households, ensuring they maintain a strong relationship with both mother and father. Additionally, both parties will undergo family counseling to address the emotional impact of these events. Relief washed over me. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was fair. The children would have both parents in their lives, and I could focus on rebuilding a stable home for them. Emma looked distraught, but there was a glimmer of acceptance in her eyes. She nodded, acknowledging the judge's decision. As we left the courtroom, she approached me, her voice trembling. John, thank you for not taking the kids away from me. I promise I'll do everything I can to be a better mother. I nodded, still wary but willing to give her the chance to prove herself. We need to do this for Amy and Ben. They deserve the best from both of us. With the trial behind us, the hard work of moving forward began. I focused on creating a stable, loving environment for the kids, ensuring they felt secure despite the changes in our family dynamic. The family counseling sessions were challenging but necessary, helping us navigate the complex emotions and rebuild trust. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but I was determined to stay strong for my children. We had been through the worst, and now it was time to heal and look towards a brighter future. Emma and I would always be linked by our children, but our paths were now separate, each of us striving to find our own way forward. With the trial behind us, I focused on rebuilding my life and creating a sense of normalcy for Amy and Ben. The transition was challenging, but each day brought new opportunities for healing and growth. I moved into a new house, not too far from the old one, ensuring that the kids could maintain their routines and stay close to their friends in school. The new house felt like a fresh start. It was a modest two-story home with a large backyard where Amy and Ben could play. We spent weekends decorating their rooms, allowing them to choose their favorite colors and themes. It was important for them to feel at home, to know that despite the changes, they were loved and safe. The family counseling sessions were difficult at first. Talking about our feelings and the events that had torn our family apart was painful, but it also brought us closer. The kids slowly began to understand that, despite the separation, they still had two parents who loved them deeply. Emma and I made a concerted effort to co-parent amicably, putting the needs of our children above our own lingering resentments. One evening, as I was helping Amy with her homework, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Dad, are you happy now?" Her question caught me off guard. I paused, considering my response carefully. "I'm getting there, sweetheart. It's been a tough time, but things are getting better every day." Amy smiled, satisfied with my answer, and went back to her homework. Her simple question made me realize how far we had come and how much further we had to go. In the months that followed, I focused on self-care and personal growth. I joined a local gym, started running again, and even picked up a new hobby, photography. Capturing the beauty of the world through a lens helped me see life from a new perspective. It was a therapeutic escape, allowing me to express my emotions in a creative way. One weekend, I took Amy and Ben on a hiking trip to a nearby nature reserve. It was a sunny day, and the fresh air and stunning scenery were invigorating. As we reached the top of a hill, we sat down to rest and enjoy the view. "Dad, this is awesome!" Ben exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. I smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "I'm glad you like it, buddy. We'll do this more often." As we sat there, soaking in the beauty of nature, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and painful, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. I realized that true happiness wasn't about having a perfect life, but about appreciating the small, meaningful moments. Back in town, I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. One of them, Lisa, was a fellow parent I met at one of Amy's soccer games. She was kind, empathetic, and easy to talk to. We started meeting up for coffee, and over time our friendship grew into something more. Lisa was a breath of fresh air. She understood my past without judgment and encouraged me to look forward. Our relationship blossomed naturally, built on trust and mutual respect. Introducing her to Amy and Ben was a big step, but they took to her quickly, and she became a positive presence in our lives. Emma and I continued to navigate our co-parenting arrangement. There were still difficult moments, but we learned to communicate more effectively and prioritize the well-being of our children. She also worked hard to rebuild her life, focusing on her bakery business and repairing her relationship with Amy and Ben. One day while picking up the kids from Emma's house, she pulled me aside. "John, I know we can't change the past, but I want to thank you for giving me a chance to be a better mother. I know I've caused you so much pain, and I'm truly sorry." Her words were sincere, and for the first time, I felt a sense of closure. "Emma, the past is behind us. Let's just focus on being the best parents we can be for Amy and Ben." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, John." As time passed, the wounds began to heal. I learned to let go of the anger and embrace the present. My relationship with Lisa deepened, and we started making plans for a future together. Amy and Ben thrived, growing into happy, well-adjusted kids despite the challenges they had faced. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I had learned about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of moving forward. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I had come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Lisa, watching the sunset, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The path had been rocky, but I had found my footing. Surrounded by the love of my children and the support of a wonderful partner, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. Life after betrayal wasn't easy, but it had led me to a place of strength and clarity. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes, and now I was looking forward to the future with hope and optimism. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found a new beginning, and with it, a new sense of peace and happiness.